I'm going to be running today's workshop on customer discovery, which is one of my favorite topics in startup development. It's great to see so many of you here today, and hopefully you can take a lot out of today's session in terms of thinking about how to develop your ideas and prepare them to do give the best possible account of yourselves when it comes to applying for the Mayor's Entrepreneur Award. Before we start, I wanted to sort of talk about the format for today. So we've got about 45 minutes of the workshop itself, and then at the end we're going to finish with a Q&A of a previous winner of the Mayor's Entrepreneur Award. And so if you do have questions, feel free to DM me them in the chat box, and I'm going to look to leave some time at the end of the workshop to talk about any questions you might have. But I will keep all questions to the end. And the second thing is that there's a lot of content we're covering today, but don't worry, because first of all, we can share these slides with you after the event. And the second is we've actually prepared a step-by-step guide to effective customer discovery, which gives you a kind of really bite-sized, easy to follow guide for doing this in your own time. So hopefully you'll have all sorts of different tools to take this forward after today. So where are my slides? Today is all about customer discovery. And why is this important? Well, I love this quote from Albert Einstein, who said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. Now, why is one of the most influential physicists and most intelligent people probably of history so fixated about thinking about problems and not just solutions? And that is what today is all about, focusing on the problem. So over the next hour or so, we're going to be looking at what makes a great idea. I'm going to be introducing you to concepts around customer discovery and talking you through 5 key steps to discovering your customers. And then at the end, we're going to finish with something really exciting, which is a Q&A with Sol Taxtaite, who's a founder of Mimica, who won a previous version of the Mayor's Entrepreneur Awards. A little bit about me. My name's Ed. My background is in a mixture of startups and entrepreneurship, education, operations, and also classical music. I'm a classical musician. Over the last few years, I have directly mentored probably about 75 different early stage startups who have gone on to raise a whole lot of money and are growing really quickly in spaces from healthcare through to agriculture, education, artificial intelligence, all sorts of different fields. And now I'm the country manager at a tech education startup called FireTech. So that's a little bit about me. And basically what I love is helping people at the early stages of their startup journeys to be successful and to grow and explore the world through entrepreneurship. So what makes a great idea? The way I like to talk about this is through 2 separate things. The first, an inspired hunch, and the second, proving that hunch through testing. So at this stage of entrepreneurship, you are essentially like scientists in a lab who have a hypothesis about a problem to solve, about the customers or users that problem affects. And you start to develop some hypotheses that could form the basis of an idea. But an idea on its own is nothing until you have proven that or validated that there is demand or need for that idea. And that is what today is about. Very quickly, cheaply approaching your customers to validate that there is a demand for your idea. So over the last few years, I've worked with all sorts of different startups, and the first thing when they come to me for support or mentorship, the first thing I ask them is maybe not what you'd think. The first thing I ask is, who have you spoken to? Really often in the startup context, the number one place where early stage entrepreneurs fall down is they spend a lot of time sitting in their room theorizing about ideas, product, how they're going to work, but they don't actually go out and speak to their customers. And I believe that the people who best understand their customers are the ones who have the highest probability of success at this earliest stage. And that's what today is all about. So why is this so important? Well, fundamentally, customers and paying customers in particular are what make a product successful in a startup context. And without paying customers, it doesn't matter how good, how innovative, how beautiful, how affordable your product is, it will fail. You are dependent on the interest of these customers in your product for the success of your whole startup. What better reason than that for really focusing your attention on what they need at this earlier stage. And throughout our lives, we see all sorts of different examples of where designers, entrepreneurs, product specialists, architects haven't thought about their customers. And this is a classic one. This is basically the difference between design and user experience. In this case, the designers or the architects have built these lovely paths, but they haven't thought about actually how those users or their customers are going to use those paths, and people have just taken the path of least resistance and crossed straight across that path. So basically, they've made their, time-intensive and cost-intensive design redundant. And this next one is one that really annoys me, that there is a push sign with a handle on it. Why'd you put a handle on a door that you're supposed to push? It is counterintuitive. They're not thinking about their users at the heart of their design process. And I wanted to bring this to life with a case study of a startup that I've worked with directly. They're an amazing medtech startup called See the Signs, who are now helping tackle cancer diagnosis at the earliest stage in GP surgeries all across the country. But when they started, they were trying to figure out who this tool was for. They built an algorithm for picking up the signs of cancer at the earliest stage, and they thought it was for patients. But then they realized what happens when you put a powerful diagnostic tool into the hands of patients is that everyone is sort of self-diagnosing, and you're removing the vital role of the expert. So they pivoted and realized that actually their key user that they wanted to solve a problem for was the GPs themselves. So how could they build a tool that was specific to the GP's challenge, which was that GPs are generalists by definition, but do not have the expert training to pick up these often quite nuanced and complex signs of cancer. And they have now built this tool to allow GPs to pick up on those signs and save potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of lives across the country. It's a really extraordinary tool. But what stops us doing this? Well, I believe there's a whole bunch of different reasons why we don't speak to our customers at the earliest stage. First of all, it's kind of scary. It's kind of uncomfortable. I remember when I was setting out as an entrepreneur and building an education company, I felt uncomfortable going and speaking to head teachers or teachers at schools that I didn't know. So I was a bit nervous. The second is that we believe our assumptions are right. We often suffer from confirmation bias, and we don't want to be disproven because we're really wedded to our ideas. The next reason is that we obsess about our product vision. We set out to design and build a certain product, let's say it's an app, and you're obsessed about building that app, even though it might turn out that no one wants that app, or actually the app wasn't the right product to begin with. And lastly, it's easier, it's more comfortable to stay seated behind a screen and do all the stuff that you can do, like graphic design, building logos, building websites, building your product, that doesn't involve actually going out and speaking to customers. But today, I'm going to give you the tools you need to really do this customer discovery piece effectively. So what is customer development? So customer discovery is just one part of this wider process called customer development that this guy on the screen came up with. He's someone called Steve Blank, who really is the godfather of the lean startup movement. I'm sure many of you have come across that term or read the book by Eric Ries, The Lean Startup. And it is all about kind of rapid building, testing, and iterating of new startup ideas. And Steve Blank's big phrase was "get out of the building." And he means that both physically and metaphorically. Go and learn about the problem you're solving, not by sitting behind a computer and doing desk-based research, but actually getting out there and speaking to your users and learning about them. And he says that is what makes the best startups successful. So customer development is broadly a hypothesis-driven approach to understanding who your customers are, what problems and needs they have, how they're currently behaving, and which solutions they will actually give you money for, even if that product is not yet built. So this is turning back to that word hypothesis or hunch that I opened with, that this is a process about having a hunch and going out and testing it. And that's how you can build the best ideas. And customer development is actually a four-step process, which goes from understanding your customers to building the right tools, operating models, products around that, then going out and selling those products or services, and then scaling your operations as you build the company. But at this stage, we are just looking at step one, which is customer discovery. And why do we do this? Well, basically, at the heart of this is the premise that for every hour you spend speaking to your user, you will save 5, 10, 20, 100 hours of time on your startup. This time is never wasted. It is so vital to really invest the time in speaking to your users. And at this stage, a lot of people say, well, maybe I'll just send out a big survey. And surveys can be effective, but actually nothing beats actual face-to-face interaction with your user, because surveys can often have the same problems around confirmation bias, around the way you structure or word your questions. And so I can't insist enough about making this primary market research and actually going and speaking to your users themselves. So how is this done? Well, I feel that customer discovery follows these 5 steps. Number 1, you form a hypothesis. Number 2, you find potential customers to talk to. Number 3, you ask them the right questions to test your hypotheses. 4, you interpret or make sense of the answers you've been given. And then 5, the final step, to figure out what to build to keep learning. And that essentially means your MVP, or minimum viable product, the earliest form of the product that you will build for your startup. And today we're going to look most deeply into steps 1, 2, and 3. And then if time at the end, we're going to quickly touch on steps 4 and 5, but we'll also go into more depth about those steps in the upcoming workshops over the next couple of weeks. But for you guys who are looking to to apply for the Mayor's Entrepreneur Awards, the first step is to think about what problem you want to solve. And I'm sure most of you have picked a problem that's important to you and are probably already going out tackling that problem and thinking of great ideas to take that forward. But if you haven't, you are very welcome to find inspiration on the awesome GLA website, which I will show you here, which under the Mayor's Entrepreneur Competition, they've actually listed probably about 50 different example challenges to inspire you to enter the competition. So I'm going to share that in the chat now, in case you haven't seen that. There's a whole range, as I said, of different challenges that you can check out. Do feel free to DM me any questions you have as we go along, by the way. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat channel. So on that list of challenges, under the health section or health theme, one of the challenges is called AI and London's aging population. And so to bring to life this customer development process, I'm going to choose one of the challenges the GLA team have written up, which is how would you use data, AI, chatbots, machine learning, or cognitive technologies to help support London's aging population. So that is the example I'm going to use to kind of bring to life this process. So let's look at these 5 steps. Number 1 is form a hypothesis. Now, what do we mean by a hypothesis? Essentially, this is about the educated assumptions you need to make about your problem area that you will then go about testing to see whether you'll prove right or wrong. So some assumptions you might want to think about are who wants your idea to exist, i.e. who are your target audience? What problems do your target audience face? How big are these problems? How impacted are your target audience by these problems? That's important because if it's just an insignificant problem, they probably won't be kind of biting your arm off to get your product. But if it is a big problem they face every day, for example, then there will probably be a really big demand for the solution that you're building. Then next, why would they use your product or service? What needs would it be solving for them? And how much are they willing to pay to use your product or service? So thinking about those assumptions are really important at this earlier stage. And so to bring that to life with my problem area that I've just chosen, here are some hypotheses. So number 1, elderly people in care homes lack regular connection with friends, family, and volunteers outside the home, and this causes loneliness. So my first hypothesis is that elderly people in care homes are lonely. Second, I made an assumption about how they use technology. If I'm looking to use technology, I need to think about what their behavior is around technology. So I've said they have some access to tech hardware, like smartphones, but however, they're not comfortable using this technology independently. Okay, so I need to go out and test this, whether or not this hypothesis is correct. Next, I said their preferred means of communication is by phone or video call, like the Zoom we're on today. And the best way to schedule time with them is through their carer. So what this is saying is actually my target user might be the elderly people in the care home, but maybe my target customer or partner would be the carers themselves. So I need to kind of test and explore that. And then lastly, I've made an assumption about budget, that care homes have a monthly budget of £100 per resident per month. for entertainment. And I'm kind of bracketing connection with family and friends around entertainment. Okay, so those are my hypotheses. And next, you need to find and recruit potential customers to talk to. And it's really important at this stage to not waste your time, because you could speak to everyone under the sun about your idea, but actually it's not a good use of your time unless they meet specific criteria. You want to make sure you're speaking to the right people. So the first step is actually to write up almost like a job spec or job description of who that interviewee is. And then that will help focus your efforts about who you're going to speak to in your customer interviews. Then you want to start thinking about where you're going to recruit these interviewees from. Great place to start is from your immediate network of friends and family. And you can ask them, do you know a person who might do X, or who might live in a care home or work in a care home, etc. Some other ideas, you can ask your lecturers, alumni from your university, fellow students at your existing university or different universities. You can email people directly, and I'll show you in a moment a good technique for doing that. You can find them on social, slide into their DMs. And you can also think about the watering holes that you might find them at. So do you find them on the street or in coffee shops? Obviously in this context, that's less relevant, but maybe there are online watering holes where they actually spend time. Are they on Facebook groups or meetup groups? Where are they hanging out? So this is a kind of approach to recruiting your interviewees. So in my example, I might actually want to speak to 3 different types of user, because as I've talked about, I want to speak to care home workers, because they're the ones who might be able to connect me with the elderly people in those care homes. But also I almost certainly want to learn from the elderly people themselves about their personal immediate experience of loneliness. And why not also speak to the families of those elderly people about their behaviors, about their experience of trying to connect with their loved ones. And then you get a kind of 360 view of this problem area. Now, I wanted to share an awesome tool that I use for my work every single week, to be honest, which is called scrap.io, which is a LinkedIn plugin. And basically, what it lets you do is find the emails of relevant people that you might want to interview. So I'm hoping you can still see my screen. And here I am on LinkedIn. And you can see in the top corner of my browser, I've got this plugin here called Scrap. It's a free plugin and it is super useful, and I will show you what it does. So LinkedIn, great place to find people to interview. And you can just type in the name of a job title. So I've typed in carer in a care home, and then I can say I want to speak to people, and then here are 25,000 different people who match the job title carer in a care home. So all of these different people might be people that I could interview to learn more about this problem I'm trying to solve. And what's awesome about Scrap is that actually lets me find their emails. So a lot of emails on LinkedIn are actually open source because they are shared with the public. And so you can click on export with email finder, and then you can create a target list. Let's call that carers. So there is my list. And then I can basically click on launch email finder, and it will what's called scrape all of those emails of these people who match this job title. And then I can basically start an email campaign to see if any of them would be interested in meeting up or chatting, in this case over Zoom, about the problem. So someone's just asked, why not send invitations with a message directly on LinkedIn? That also can work. The thing about that is that it's super manual. You have to click through every single profile on LinkedIn, whereas if you scrape off all of their email lists, you can use a tool like MailChimp, and you can send out actually really smart personalized emails that actually say, dear April, dear Lorraine, and you can do that not just one by one, but you could send 1,000 emails all at once to get as many of these interviewees recruited as possible. So that is Scrap, highly recommended tool. And here I've put together an example of how I might approach someone in a care home. And I wanted to talk you through this because it's, again, quite nuanced. So first of all, this email, you really need to grab people's attention and do it in such a way that people would like to offer their help. And so here I've tried to use language which is sort of an invitation to help about a problem that they probably care about. And I've also brought it to life by sharing a personal story. So here I say in the subject line, can you spare 15 minutes to help us tackle loneliness in elderly people in London? It's only 15 minutes. That's not a big ask. Dear Julie, I hope you're well in these changing times. Since my grandmother spent the last 10 years of her life isolated in a care home, nothing keeps me up at night more than thinking about how to reduce loneliness for elderly people in London. What matters to me most are experiences of people like you, professionals working in elderly care, and how we can best make your lives easier. I'm not talking about me, Ed, as the founder of this health tech startup. I'm talking about you, Julie. It's a much more empathetic approach. My goal is to have a conversation with 50 care professionals to understand the challenges you face. If you're willing to spare 15 minutes of your time, it would mean a lot to me. Plus, I'm happy to offer support with any issues you're tackling. I'm offering to give something back. Then lastly, I make this process as easy as possible. I say, if you're interested, please simply book a convenient slot via this link. I use a tool called calendly.com, which I'll put in the chat. And basically it means that you can very quickly pick and schedule a time without even emailing back. And it makes this whole thing seamlessly, a seamless experience. And then I sign off saying, I hope we can tackle loneliness together, to kind of inspire Julie to hopefully come on board and help me solve this problem by best understanding my users. Then the next thing is about asking the right questions. And this, for me, if you learn anything from this session today, it is about asking the right questions. As I say here, everything you know is wrong. Well, almost, because basically we are subject to cognitive bias or confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is our innate tendency to pay more attention to information that confirms our beliefs rather than anything that contradicts it. And it is this is responsible for a huge percentage of product failures. It is essentially us not listening to what our users say, but listening instead to what we believe. And we're more likely to ignore or downplay facts that contradict our belief or interpret subjective information in a way that favors what we want to believe. Please do not do this. You have to become expert scientists in using effective research techniques to find out whether your hypotheses are correct. And a great book to help you do this is a book called The Mum Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. And he talks about a story of a mum and a son talking about the son's cookbook app. And first of all, the son says, Mum, would you, basically jumps in straight away and says, Mum, would you buy this cookbook app that I'm developing? It will cost you £5 and it will give you a recipe every day that you can cook with. And she says, oh yes, darling, sounds amazing. But actually, in that series of questioning, he's learned pretty much nothing apart from kind of massaged his ego a little bit. And the book is called The Mum Test because usually if we ask our mums if an idea is good, they will just tell you point blank, yes, fantastic. They're our mums. But actually, her son in this context would have been a lot better off saying to his mum, can you talk to me about how you currently cook? How often do you use recipes? Where do you find those recipes? How often do you turn to technology? What technology do you use? How comfortable are you using that technology? How much do you spend per year on that technology or recipes in general? And basing a whole bunch of questions on existing behaviors to understand how his mum uses recipes in the kitchen. And in that series of questioning, he might discover something completely different. That, for example, his mum hates her iPhone and never uses it, that she doesn't like technology in the kitchen, that she has a recipe book that her own mum gave her, and she uses that religiously and doesn't actually look anywhere else for any recipe ideas. Who knows? But here is some guidance about asking the right questions. First of all, talk about their life instead of your idea. This is not about you selling your idea and trying to convince them that they want your idea. It's about you listening to make sure that you understand what they need. Second, to ask about specifics in the past, stuff that has actually happened, rather than generics or opinions about the future. So no hypotheticals. Would you do this? Would you buy this? Would you spend this much? That is a hypothetical about something that has not happened yet, so it is not scientific fact. Talk less and listen more, that's an obvious one, and get specific about examples. Can you name a time when? Can you talk us through the last time you used a recipe? Ask why a lot. If you use the 5 whys, so ask why 5 times as a line of questioning, you find out a lot more than just asking once. Don't ask leading questions. Don't try and push people in the direction that you want them to go. And don't let the answers fit your narrative. Don't lie to yourself. And most of all, don't take compliments with a lot of salt. You learn very little from compliments apart from having your ego massaged. So in my example around loneliness and the elderly, so if I'm speaking to someone who works in a care home, I might ask, how much do they usually spend on resident social activities? So I get a sense of budget. How do they deal with loneliness in the care home? What are the biggest issues they face around loneliness? And then I ask them, how would you rank this problem 1 to 10 in terms of severity? If it is a problem that is 1 out of 10 severity, it's probably not a particularly big pain point. But if they say it's 9 or 10 out of 10 in terms of severity, they are probably urgently looking for this problem to solve. Then next, what solutions have you tried and why are they not working? And then you can think about, where the gaps in existing provision might be. And then the last, tell me an example where one of your residents experienced loneliness. So bringing to life this pain point through specific case studies can really help you empathize with the pain point. And a good outcome of user interviews are actually to invalidate or disprove your assumptions. Because if all of your assumptions have been proven correct, actually, you probably weren't asking the right questions or listening well enough. So do make sure that you really are learning and using this opportunity to learn. You might also want to repeat the process with new assumptions or new kind of user profiles. And finally, at this point, you might also want to expand on the insights you've generated with a survey. And that means you can substantiate these really detailed, valuable one-to-one user interviews with more high volume of data, but making sure the people who complete that survey actually fit your profile. So you might add some questions to that survey saying, you know, do you work in a care home? Yes or no? Are you based in London? Yes or no? Whatever your particular interviewee criteria might be. Okay, so we are coming to the end of this section, and so I'm just going to check in to see to check in on the questions you guys are asking. How do you suggest we recruit interviewees if they are on mobile and not on LinkedIn? So there's a whole range of different ways to recruit interviewees, and LinkedIn is only one of them. So on my slides, I talked about going to your friendship network or family, and building a list of interviewees through there. You can also look at Facebook groups, meetup groups, and go and find them in the places they hang out. So where do they work? What events do they go to? What coffee shops in normal times do they go to, etc. A question about the recording of the webinar. Yes, we are recording it, so we can send it out after this. And the notes about the kind of software examples that I've included in the slides will get sent out as well. Okay. All right, so we've just got about 10 minutes now before we're going to be joined by Sol for our Q&A. So I am going to jump on to the next stage of customer development, so you know how to take this forward after your interviews. So, I remember where my slides were. Here we go. So next steps with customer discovery. So once you've done your user interviews, and by the way, a good number of interviews to do, it sounds like a lot, but anywhere between 15 and 50 is a great start. A lot of entrepreneurs do many, many more than that. I was reading a blog last week about a founder who, over the course of 2 months, spoke to 500 of his users. That guy probably knows what he's talking about in terms of his user needs, but definitely 15 or more. And if you can get upwards of 50, then you're doing super well. In terms of taking this forward, the next step is to make sense of the answers. So you've got all of these user insights from your interviews, and then you need to start kind of rationalizing and organizing those insights. And a really good way to do that is to use what is called a user POV, or point of view. And this is basically the beginning of a customer persona. If any of you have any experience working in marketing or advertising, I'm sure you're familiar with user personas. This is basically the moment where you bring to life your user by focusing on a specific customer and thinking about their pain points. So in this template that I'm using today, you can draw a picture of your example persona. You can also bring it to life with their age, demographics, where they live, what their job is, what their income level might be, etc. It's almost like you're building a version of their Facebook profile to really understand who they are and what their needs are. Then you can put together your key insights. What were the most inspiring and important insights from your discussions? You can give them a nickname to kind of bring to life who they are. And then lastly, it would be game-changing if. So how could you improve this person's experience? So don't think about the solutions so much as focusing on the needs and pain points you want to address. So I've drafted a very quick persona for an elderly person that I might be looking to serve in the case of my problem area around elderly loneliness. So this is Joan. See here, kind of punching the air in happiness, and she lives in this in a retirement home in London, 30 miles from her family. She enjoys knitting, board games with friends, and seeing her family. She uses an old Nokia phone, but has recently been given an iPad. She has recently begun to use Skype with her grandchildren, but she's not confident using the iPad, especially as her hands shake. But she hates asking for help. What an interesting insight that is. She uses Facebook 3 times a week and comments on her grandchildren's photos. She also reads knitting blogs online. She's in the early stages of dementia and needs to write things down to remember them. So that's really bringing to life some of the kind of interests and needs of Joan. And I've nicknamed her Joan, the loving but lonely grandma. And for Joan, I've said it would be game-changing if she had an easy-to-use way of keeping in regular contact with her family and hearing their news to reduce her sense of loneliness. She had new technology skills to share with her friends at her retirement home. This would make her happy and proud. And at this point, I just wanted to show you a really awesome tool that HubSpot have developed. HubSpot developed marketing software. But it is a free tool called Make My Persona, and basically it lets you build personas for free. And so I can say my persona is called Joan, and this is her avatar. Okay, I'm not quite sure why it's not working. Okay, here we go. And so here is a really nice template for building my persona for Joan. So I can put her age, she is 78 years old, her education level, and then here are some kind of prompts about some of the question areas that you might want to solve. So some of them aren't really relevant to someone who lives in a care home, but some of them definitely are. So biggest challenges they gain information by, what technology or how do they connect with their family members, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really nice and free tool for building your personas that you might like to use. Oh, you're saying that you can you can see my screen. Okay, not to worry. I will send that tool in the chat link in a moment. But just to finish up before the Q&A starts. The last stage of customer discovery is figuring out what to build to keep learning. And that is basically your minimum viable product or your prototype. And the good news is we're actually going to be talking about that in an upcoming Mes Entrepreneur workshop in 2 weeks' time. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be looking at different types of MVP. We're going to be looking at front-end app design. We can also learn about kind of video creation tools and a number of different ways of building a prototype for your idea to give you the tools you need to take your ideas forward. And so at this point, I think we have Sol on the call, or maybe not. Okay, so we're just waiting for Sol to join in the next couple of minutes. So while we do, I'm going to paste the tool that I just showed you unsuccessfully on HubSpot called Make My Persona. And I can show you, hopefully, what it looks like. Okay. So this is what Make My Persona looks like. It's just a really nice graphical tool with all of these different prompts for building a persona. And so, as I mentioned, some of them are more relevant than others, depending on who your persona is. I can write in here, they gain information by connecting with their family once per week via Zoom. Biggest challenges, loneliness, early stage dementia, lack of confidence with technology. And then there's some questions about jobs, for example, but I can just delete the boxes that aren't relevant. Job responsibility, there we go. So I'm starting to build up a really nice overview of who my customer persona is. And before Sol joins us, what better chance than to talk about the next workshop we have coming up same time next week. So 5 till 6 p.m. on the 5th of May. And this one is called Developing Your Idea. So by that stage, you will have an understanding on the back of today about how customer discovery works. And the next step is about kind of synthesizing and interpreting all of your insights from the customer discovery stage into the kind of product specifications that might sit behind your product or service, thinking about what your idea might look like when it's actually becoming a tangible product, and what kind of features and benefits you'll return to your customer. And then the end goal of next week is to turn it into what is called a value proposition, which is basically a very kind of synthesized overview of what you're setting out to achieve with your idea, which is super useful because it acts as an elevator pitch to very concisely explain what you're setting out to achieve. And also when it comes to your Mes Entrepreneur application, it really helps you condense the value of the product in terms of the problem that you're looking to solve, all the way through to your product design and the benefits and differentiation of your product or service. Okay, so I think Sol is now online. Sol,
Hi.
can you hear me? Wave. Oh yeah, great. And
I hope you can hear me.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna spotlight your video, if that's okay. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's absolutely so it can't be in person.
Well, it'd be great, first of all, if you could kind of talk a little bit more about what you do at Mimica and what that story has been like over the last few years, getting to where it is now.
So I wish I had prepared by taking our product out of my cupboard, but let me just get it. Yeah, my name is Salvega, and I was studying industrial design at Brunel University when I entered the competition, and I'd come up for my final major project an idea for a label that tells you exactly when food spoils, because you know food companies put all these conservative dates on because they have to assume the worst case scenario, but in most cases the worst case scenario doesn't happen because people are storing their food much better than the food manufacturer expects, and that causes a lot of food waste that really does not need to be happening. So I came up with a label that tells you exactly when food spoils. You just run your finger across it, and if it feels smooth like this one, it means that it's still good and fresh, and only when it turns bumpy like this one, that's when you know it has spoiled. And in fact, since winning the competition, which was such a long time ago now, 2015, then it was just a label, but since then we've developed other formats as well, such as a cap for juice and milk, which is what we ended up launching first. So it's certainly been a journey since winning, and I think if I hadn't won something like the Mayor's entrepreneur competition, I don't think I would have I shouldn't have taken that, but I think it really made me believe that I can take this idea forward, and there was something there, and it obviously gave me a bit of money to do that as well, and some of the publicity from it, it allowed supermarkets and food companies to find out about me and get in touch, and that really got the ball rolling. And I used the money to start building a team, and 4-5 years later now, gosh, it's been a long research and development process. Nothing like this has ever been developed before. We're at the stage where we're scaling up our manufacture and looking to cut loads of food waste. So yeah, that's sorry, I've probably spoken for far too long.
No, that's amazing.
Do you have any other
story.
questions?
where might we come across your products?
So we've only done small pilots before, because it's a brand new technology. We need to make sure it's accurate and right, because obviously we're dealing with food safety as well. So we're only at the point now where the concept has been validated and has been we've checked that it works every time and it's safe. So we're scaling up our manufacture of the caps with the largest juice company basically in Europe. They're based in Spain. They supply juice to all the supermarkets across Europe. So on your juice, pretty soon this year, after the virus has slowed down a bit, because that's delayed our launch a little bit, but we'll get there. And I think more than ever now, people are realizing that or being aware of their longevity of their food, because they've probably either stockpiled too much and wondering how long it'll all last, or that it's difficult to get hold of food, so people are kind of questioning expiry dates when they actually have the food, and I don't want to waste it after I queued up for an hour to get it. So I think coming out of this, it's going to be a good time to really run after this market.
That's super interesting. And thinking back to 2015, right, when you entered the awards?
Yeah, that's right.
What do you think about what do you think helped your application stand out to the team at GLA?
Gosh, you'd have to ask the judges. I think the fact that nothing quite like this had ever been done before, probably it was a bit mad. So maybe they put me into the final not expecting me to win, who knows. But I think I practiced, in the final I really practiced my pitch a lot, and it was actually one of the other applicants, a guy called Ryan, who made it to the semi-final but not to the final in the end, but he was really supportive of what I was doing, and he made me practice the hell out of it. I spent a day and a half before the pitch just pitching to him, and he would give me notes, and he was quite a hard taskmaster. So I think being really prepared and not taking it so lightly as well, because it is a really big opportunity. So yeah, and I think I was also able to identify what I didn't know, and really clearly able to identify that if I won the prize, here's what I would do next to get the answers to your questions. Because, you know, as a student project, you're not supposed to have everything sorted out yet. So that's the whole point of a student project. But showing that you have a plan for how to acquire that knowledge, or like someone that you want to hire next, or whatever that next step will be, I think having planned out your steps, I think that's something that's really important for an application.
That's really interesting. So not to try and come across as perfect so much as actually looking for the right guidance with a plan in mind, but with, you know, looking for the support and funding to make it happen.
I really feel like the measure of a success of an entrepreneur is not like to be a know-it-all, but is really the people who are learn-it-alls. I think that they're the most. I've had the privilege of meeting lots of successful entrepreneurs through what I've been doing over the last few years, and all of them are learn-it-alls, the successful ones.
Yeah, totally. I really agree. And any sort of final thoughts or top tips for the guys on the call ahead of their application deadline in a couple of weeks?
The word limit is not a target. If you can say it in fewer words, then do. Try to back up everything that you say with numbers. Like if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And really paint a picture of the future that you think could exist if your product or solution was in the world. Like, you need really tangible evidence for what you have, but then you need a big picture for where you want to go. So and I think more than anything, good luck, like and definitely apply, because, you know, if you don't take your product forward and your idea forward to make the world a better place, no one else is going to do that for you. So it's up to us to make a better, brighter future. So I'm really pleased to see so many of you on the call, and I hope to see an application from all of you.
Thanks so much. If you do you have a couple more minutes? There's just a question that's just come through on the chat. I studied design at Brunel too. Your main benefit is environmental, but proving that customer-wise can be tricky. How did you emphasize that in your application?
That's a really good point. Obviously, the whole reason that Mimica exists is to help prevent food waste. I hope you guys can hear me okay. I think my internet's dodgy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So, yeah, the whole point of the company is to make an environmental impact, as you say, but it has to make commercial sense, because you can be like the nicest and cuddliest idea in the world, but if you don't make the people who need to finance it, if it doesn't make sense for them, it's not going to happen. So I have to say that's something that I really struggled with at the start as well. And I have to say, when I won the prize, I didn't have that figured out yet, but I knew that it was important to figure that out, if that makes sense. So today I know that for retailers and food producers, food waste costs them a lot of money, and they're actually losing sales from consumers who maybe wasted juice last week, so then this week they're not going to buy juice because, oh, it was a waste last time. So it's actually memory of wasting food is actually making them lose sales. So really we're now able to quantify that through the pilots that we've done, but certainly I didn't have any kind of those numbers before. But I think it's good to have some like hypotheses for what the economic drivers could be. But I don't think at this stage it's that important to have validated them, because I think it's quite difficult to, at least in my case it was, because I was dealing with like, my customers would be multinational food companies, and I didn't have access to them when I was just finished being a student.
Yeah, great. Well, today's session was all about kind of hypotheses and how you go out and test assumptions around your idea. So very, very relevant. We should probably close off here, Sol, but thanks so much for your time and for dialing in and sharing your story and your experience and those top tips with everyone on the call today. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And good luck with the future of Mimica. Super exciting.
Thank you very much. All right, guys.
All right, cheers. Okay, just before we finish and wrap up, I am just going to share my screen one more time to show you this guide that I have put together. And because the next step from today is not just to learn from what you've heard today, but actually to go out and do, because entrepreneurship and startups, it's all about action. And so I'm building the startup guide for each of you, and I've included the first chapter on customer discovery in here, and it has included basically a summary of all of the steps that we've gone through today, and also some helpful tools like Calendly, how to use the 5 whys, and also if you don't have access to the mum test, I've actually included a free PDF of a book called Talking to Humans, which is pretty much the same thing. It's a really good read, and you can just click on this hyperlink here and read that, which saves you 15 quid on Amazon. And yeah, and then also at the end here, I've included the persona generation tool from HubSpot that we talked about. So to just wrap up today's session, the thing that I really want you to take away is that great startups are not born sitting in your bedroom thinking about an idea. They are really born through an iterative and scientific approach to testing and validating what starts as an assumption. That is the biggest lesson that you can take away from this workshop and about the early stages of startups. That through this process of testing your assumptions and learning, you will take your idea on leaps and bounds. So if you feel a little bit nervous or uncomfortable, running customer interviews, of course, we all do, but it's absolutely part of the process. And actually, it can be super fun. Who knows what conversations you'll have or the people you'll meet. Just go out and see what happens and enjoy the process, and you will see, the progression that your idea makes throughout that. So that is my number one takeaway from today. The second is to think about who you speak to and what you ask them. So reflecting on that approach to the mum test that we talked about, thinking about not wasting your time speaking to the wrong people, and really focus down on speaking to the right people and asking them the questions in such a way that you will learn as much as possible. And then the third thing is use the resources that you have from today. Hopefully you have a pretty easy to use guide to make this happen, and you can now set yourself the challenge to see if you can speak to 10 people by the end of the week. Well, why not? It is totally achievable and you can make it happen. Thanks everyone for your messages. Someone said, where'd you get a copy of the guide? I'm going to share that with you now. So there is the guide in the chat channel if you need it. And on there's, I think, also my contact details. If not, I'm going to share those contact details with you here. So I'll just leave this on the screen. So you can email me at ed@futurefaculty.co if you've got any questions, comments, feedback, thoughts from today. Be very happy to hear from you. And good luck. Thanks so much for joining. And enjoy and relish this exciting next step of discovering the customers that you're looking to serve over the next few weeks, and hopefully see many of you in next week's workshop. All right, cheers, bye.